Welcome back, everyone. So, if you've been watching this channel lately, or the last few video uploads, I've been discussing a few subjects here. Today, I want to give you guys another connection. Actually, some of you have mentioned this in the comments in the past few videos. Now, if you keep in mind the information that I discuss in those videos, then this will make a bit more sense. Now, folks, in one of my latest videos titled, "This is Shocking But Real," I mentioned that there was this plan for conflicts with 7 countries in the Middle East, starting with Iraq and ending with Iran as we move into this age of disclosure. So, just to refresh your memory, the United States war with Iraq, there were 2 major conflicts. The Gulf War from 1990 to 1991, and the Iraq War from 2003 to 2011. Iraq, under Saddam Hussein, invaded Kuwait in August 1990, claiming it was historically part of Iraq and accused Kuwait of overproducing oil. The invasion alarmed the U.S. and its allies, and so a coalition of 34 nations, led by the U.S., launched Operation Desert Shield and then Operation Desert Storm in 1991. Then, fast forward, following the September 11th, 2001 attacks, the U.S. under George W. Bush had concerns that Iraq possessed weapons of mass destruction, which could be nuclear, chemical, or biological. They never specified what type, right? Okay, so the UN inspections found no active WMD stockpiles, but the US and UK wanted military action anyway. So the US, along with coalition forces from the UK and Australia, invaded Iraq in 2003. This was called Operation Iraqi Freedom. Now, the reason I bring this up is because as all this was happening, something else was happening at the same time. An archaeologist was actively surveying land in Iraq, looking for something. Here's an abstract of the report that was published. Magnetometry in Uruk, Iraq, the city of King Gilgamesh. Uruk is one of the most famous sites for the early cultural development at Mesopotamia. The Sumerian city-state was also important for the origin of writing, and Uruk was the scene of action of man's oldest epic, the famous Epic of Gilgamesh. During the time of the Sassanids, 400 AD, the city was given up completely. Today, the ruin is dominated by shallow hills and wadis, covered by pottery, mud bricks, and slags. The area is totally free of modern buildings and far away from the modern village of Warka. Therefore, it is an ideal place for uncompensated cesium magnetometry. The most sensational find was the discovery of a canal system inside the city. Furthermore, the magnetogram shows the remains of buildings of the Babylonian type, as well as garden structures, a Middle Babylonian graveyard, and the so-called New Year's temple of the god Anu or goddess Ishtar. The city wall, which we prospected in a length of more than 1 kilometer, includes a water gate and is nearly 40 meters broad. From magnetometry, it is evident that it was built by burned mud bricks as it was described by the Epic. In the west of the New Year's temple, in the middle of the former Euphrates River, we detected the remains of a building which may be interpreted as a burial. But if this building is the grave of the famous King Gilgamesh, as it was described by the Epic of Gilgamesh, it must remain speculative. And this was published April 2003. So, what happened with that discovery, folks? take a guess. So, in the spring of 2003, German archaeologist Jörg W.E. Fassbinder was part of a team surveying the ancient site of Uruk in what is now southern Iraq, using modern magnetometry to peer into the ground without digging. Uruk is one of the oldest cities in human history, and it is the setting for the Epic of Gilgamesh. That includes a passage about Gilgamesh's burial beneath the Euphrates River. By studying differences in the magnetic signature of the soil, Fassbinder and his colleagues were able to create detailed maps showing buried structures and features across the site, including canal systems and building foundations that matched descriptions from ancient texts. Now, in April 2003, he spoke to the international press and for programs like the BBC World Service about what they had found near the dry bed of the Euphrates. He reported that magnetometer scans had revealed the remains of a building in the former river course that could be interpreted as a burial, and he noted that its location and form looked very similar to that described in the Epic of Gilgamesh. He didn't outright claim that this was the tomb of Gilgamesh, but he said it was a possibility worth further investigation. He explained that the technology he was using let archaeologists see buried mud brick walls and other features in detail. Fassbinder also described how his team had mapped garden plots, houses, and a canal network. But this was never followed by an excavation of the tomb structure. And with the outbreak of the Iraq War, just weeks later, the region became unstable and further fieldwork was postponed. No confirmed excavation or discovery of Gilgamesh's tomb has been published since then. And Fassbinder himself later pointed out that the media coverage had exaggerated the data when they weren't able to prove what they found. Now, folks, once the outbreak of the war occurred, there was a breakdown of civil authority, and that affected archaeology and ancient sites. So archaeologists had to stop what they were doing for the most part. Also, when conflicts like this begin, you of course have people looting all over. And because Fassbinder was afraid of the site being looted, he left it as is. Nothing was dug up, right? One thing to understand about this is that there are documented cases of military occupation and damage to major archaeological sites during and after the conflict. For example, the U.S. and other forces established camps and bases on parts of the ancient site of Babylon, with construction of helipads, parking areas, infrastructure that was cutting through some of these sites, causing irreversible damage. Now, I want to mention something here. Back then, there were some internet posts, especially on forums and message boards, about locals saying that military vehicles and trucks arrived at Uruk at night after the invasion started. And according to these accounts, the trucks that they had were loaded with boxes or artifacts and driven off, with soldiers or contractors guarding the area. There are posts also claiming that the U.S. or coalition troops were seen digging, driving heavy equipment, or otherwise disturbing excavation areas at night, and that locals were told to stay away or that the site was secured for military use. So there's that story, okay? But something else happened during the war. The Iraq National Museum was the main repository of Sumerian, Akkadian, Babylonian, and Assyrian artifacts in Baghdad. Now, before the U.S. invaded, cultural heritage experts, including museum staff and international organizations like UNESCO, warned the Pentagon and coalition planners that Iraq's museums and archaeological sites were at risk. They specifically flagged the Iraq National Museum as housing irreplaceable Sumerian and Mesopotamian artifacts, okay? Now, when Baghdad fell in April 2003, the U.S. and Allied forces were focused on military operations and city control. Some reports indicate that a small group of U.S. soldiers was stationed near the museum. Eyewitnesses described looters entering the museum through unsecured doors and windows within hours, suggesting that the guarding force was minimal. It was either poorly coordinated or just unaware of the threat. Witnesses and museum staff reported that armed men and crowds went through the exhibits, targeting high-value items like Sumerian statues, jewelry, cuneiform tablets. Some of the looting involved trucks carrying away crates or artifacts, but the identity of the looters remains unclear. Now, going back to what I talked about before, about planned conflicts starting with Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and then Iran, what we may see in the near future are governments disclosing ancient artifacts and relics that are going to shift people's worldviews. Probably part of this age of disclosure, because they have things they are going to try and show us to change our thinking about history and the world we live in. Now, if Gilgamesh or Nimrod was a descendant of the Nephilim and also a giant, that would mean that his spirit would have been disembodied and he would be around here somewhere existing as an evil spirit or demon. Which means if they were able to obtain the DNA from his fleshly body, they could possibly rebuild his body so that it could be possessed by his spirit. Does that make sense? In that case, we would have the return of Gilgamesh. So, this should make you think about something. From Iraq and all these other places in Iran, whenever U.S. soldiers or Allied forces went in on ground missions, how often were they on missions related to war, and how often were they on missions to find something? Artifacts and relics to add to their collection. Now, folks, here's another connection that some of you may have heard of. Whether it's true or not, that's something you'll have to decide for yourself. Now, in the Epic of Gilgamesh, there is this story. After the death of his friend, Enkidu, Gilgamesh becomes afraid of his own mortality and decides to find Utnapishtim, the immortal survivor of the Great Flood, or who we know to be Noah. Okay? So his quest takes him far from Uruk, across dangerous mountains, deserts, and rivers, and eventually he reaches the twin peaks of Mount Mashu, which was guarded by scorpion men, part human, part scorpion. and they stood watch at the entrance to the land where the sun rises, which was the threshold to the world of Utnapishtim. In order for him to enter, Gilgamesh had to pass through a tunnel that stretches for 6 leagues of darkness, according to the text. The tunnel is described as a passage of terrifying shadows, but it ultimately leads him to the other side, where the light of the sun shines and the waters of life flow. Once through, he encounters Utnapishtim, who challenges him with tests and tells him the secrets of mortality and the flood. Now, some people believe that what's being described here is a stargate, and some people, such as Dan Burish, who worked at Area 51, also believe that this stargate was uncovered in Iraq way back in the 1920s, and that the Iraq War was a cover-up so that they could find it.
On my orders, coalition forces have begun striking selected targets of military importance to undermine Saddam Hussein's ability to wage war. These are opening stages of what will be a broad and concerted campaign.
On March 19, 2003, a year and a half after the attacks of September 11th, the United States military invaded Iraq. Now, this was strange because Iraq had nothing to do with the attacks on September 11th, so of course, American politicians had to find another reason to give the public for the reason for the invasion, and this reason became weapons of mass destruction.
I think we will find weapons of mass destruction. I think it's important that we do.
He's lying to him when he says he doesn't have weapons of mass destruction.
I take the fact that he develops weapons of mass destruction very seriously.
These weapons of mass destruction were actually non-existent. None were ever found in Iraq, and it turns out the intelligence on these WMDs was pretty faulty and absolutely did not warrant the invasion of a nation.
The man charged with finding WMDs released this report, revealing that he'd found nothing.
We did not find stocks of either chemical or biological weapons. Active nuclear weapons program, no. We found no evidence, nor do we judge that there was one.
Since there was no real surface level reasons for the invasion of Iraq, here's a theory of a hidden reason. As American troops step foot on Iraqi sand, what would you expect their first targets to be? A weapons depot, enemy safe houses detected through surveillance, or maybe one of Saddam Hussein's palaces? These would be good guesses, but they'd be wrong. The first place the United States military targeted was a museum. Not just any museum, but a museum right in the heart of Babylon. Babylon is the most famous city from ancient Mesopotamia, whose ruins lie in modern-day Iraq, 59 miles southwest of Baghdad. The name is derived from Bavil or Bavalim, which in Akkadian meant Gate of God or Gate of the Gods. This claim of the military first targeting a Babylonian museum was given to Tom Horn, the creator of Skywatch TV, by a supposed curator from the Babylonian Museum. Now, of course, we can't just go off of one testimony for solid, absolute truth, but we can look at the rest of what happened in Iraq and see that this could very well be the case, including a strange message sent to Hillary Clinton found on the Freedom of Information website talking about the tomb of Gilgamesh and where the Nephilim body is buried. I'll get to that in just a moment, but a few other articles to back up this claim. Fox News in 2015 posted, UNESCO US military did damage to the historic site of Babylon. Within the article it says that Americans handed the site back to the Iraqis 21 months after the March 2003 invasion, pointing out the fact that the US military was controlling sections of ancient Babylon. Or another article here saying US to return Gilgamesh tablet, 17,000 other artifacts taken from Iraq. This article on Al Jazeera says that it's believed the tablet was looted from an Iraqi museum in 1990 and introduced in the United States in 2007, just showing the fact that the United States has a history of stealing artifacts, especially those related to Nephilim bloodlines. Now, there's a video that surfaced in 2013 claiming to record the actual tomb, body, and some artifacts of Gilgamesh. This footage, of course, cannot be verified and very well could be fake, but I figured I would play that footage while I pull up a message that was sent to Hillary Clinton that is absolutely not fake. This message can be found on the US Department of State Freedom of Information Act website. I will leave a link to this in the description below. If you click on the top link, it pulls up a number of messages sent to government officials. Now, I read online that this one was allegedly sent to Hillary Clinton. I guess there's no way to truly know that for sure, but this is absolutely a message that was sent in regards to the body and location of a buried Nephilim. On page 470, 6 messages up from the bottom of the page, we can see that Denitra D. Singar sent a message that reads, requesting documents pertaining to the resurrection chamber of Gilgamesh, the location of his body, and the location of the buried Nephilim. This was on December 12, 2018, and the case status for this is closed. So this message at the very least proves that the United States has an interest in locating the body and burial sites of giants and Nephilim, something that, of course, if they were ever questioned about this in public, such as happens with inquiries to the Smithsonian Museum, would say that giants and Nephilim didn't exist. Now, what would be the reason for anybody to locate or cover up the existence of the giants, the offspring of the Nephilim? Well, because there is a high likelihood that they are trying to reincarnate these entities, and when successful, these will be some of the entities that come upon the earth in the last days that cause men's heart to faint from fear of those things coming upon the earth. An obscure end times Bible passage that is rarely mentioned is in Isaiah 13, the burden against Babylon, which Isaiah the son of Amos saw. In Isaiah 13:3 it says, I give command and I bring them. Giants are coming to fulfill my wrath, rejoicing at the same time and insulting. Could this be the reason why the CIA is investing in so many DNA editing firms? One such firm, Colossal, who claim on the surface level's main focus is to bring back the woolly mammoth by the year 2027. Just imagine what such DNA editing firms would do if they got the bones of giants, the offspring of Nephilim, and were able to bring them back to life. I covered this more deeply in a recent video that I'll leave linked in the description. We also have claims that giants even still exist, and the military is trying to extract them as well. The Kandahar giant is an alleged 12-foot humanoid that confronted the US forces in the mountainous regions of Kandahar. We know giants existed before the flood, and even after that, there could be a possibility that a very small remnant of giants even still exists today in the earth. Much of this information and these theories have been released by the pioneers in the subject, Gen 6 Productions, L.A. Marzulli, and Skywatch TV. I recommend looking into those guys more if you're interested in the subject. So what was the real reason for the Iraqi war? Was it to find weapons of mass destruction that we really didn't have solid evidence actually even existed? Or was it to find Nephilim DNA to resurrect the giants that God will use against those who resurrect them to fulfill his wrath, as told to us in the burden against Babylon in Isaiah 13? An interesting topic and an interesting theory at the very least. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and God bless.
About not finding WMD when you had a CIA director who said slam dunk.
No, he said slam dunk that the case. He didn't say slam dunk weapons. His point, just so you know, is that the case was a solid case. In other words, presenting the case would be a solid case to the people.
A solid case that there were WMD.
Right, but the evidence showed that he had WMD. I'm not.
Right.
I think we're splitting here.
Right.
Sorry.
Watching the deep start laughing. Great trees from the days of Noah, reaching where the bright clouds roam, pillars where the heavens open, mountains made of living bone. I can feel that ghost still breathing in the stone the rivers tall. I see a forest frozen in the face of the devil's tower. Top low on the long drive, flat road, open cattle signs, one strike on the red skyline, rising like a buried memory. Wind hums like an old hymn, air taste that can tremble in. Time to rock, my fingers sing. Once this was green in LA. Great trees from the days of Noah, Reaching where the bright clouds roll. Endless where the heavens open. Oh, mountains made of living. Oh, I can feel that ghost still breathing. In the storm of rivers. Oh, I see a forest rose. In the face of the devil's tower. Were you a stump of Eden, cut by a judgment flame? Did watchers rest on your shoulder? Did you hear every hidden name? If I press my ear to your heartbeat, would I hear that ancient rain falling, falling, falling over and over again? Over again. Take cheese on the days of Noah, reaching where the bright clouds roll. Pillars where the heavens open. Mountains made of living gold. I can feel that ghost still breathing. In the storm the rivers flow. I see a forest frozen in the face of the devil's tower. Old words on a torn cage. Death seed a desert claim. Still you stand there half remembered, pointing where the sky once came.
Heaven's gate wide open, stars fell down like rain. Broken halos hoping to shed their godly chain. They saw the daughters of men walking on the earth, took them for their women and gave new blood a birth. Oh, the Nephilim, giants walk